if all works out well, this will be the complete build of the do-it-yourself rally car. So what you're looking at here is basically a view of the completed chassis with the front and rear differentials set down inside there. Let's see if we can get a little better view. And they are glued in place too to help add some rigidity. I don't know if that will come through or not. You can still see blue paint, whereas making shims to slide up underneath there perfectly, or as perfect as I could get them. You can see my front bumper's been trimmed down significantly. It's been angled up slightly. The rear's angled up slightly more. This area here had been cut down for the front tire area. I cut it down. Anyway, that you want to know how much I cut it down. It really doesn't matter because your vehicle will be different, but I end up cutting down about the width of the plastic, the thickness of the plastic. So it's 3/16 of an inch thick, and I'll show you the tools that I used. Alright, so what I got here is just basic drill bit set that I used. Use various different drill bits in there, mostly 1/16 and I believe it was 3/32, 5/64. 1/16 and 5/64 were the most common that were used. Piece of sandpaper, a couple blocks of wood, or this happens to be 120 grit. A homemade countersink. And that's just barely bigger than the head of an M2 screw. And it's just a piece of wood, man. You chuck it all the way into your drill and just to where you want it. And that becomes your countersink, and I use that in the bottom of the chassis. So very easily done. And then to round it, I just chucked it back in the drill and hit it with a piece of sandpaper, actually my rotary tool. Ruler with metric and standard, cutoff wheel, sanding drum. A spiral bit, I used a lot of that. A diamond bit for the motor mount. And a different kind of spiral bit for different areas. Yeah, just found it helpful, and my favorite cheap-ass paint. And of course, a cordless drill. Other two tools I used was a table saw, unnecessary, and a chop saw that was unnecessary. It just kind of speeds things up a little bit. Alright, so my first task was, because the plastic naturally has a bow in it, almost every kind of plastic will always have some sort of bow in it, and add rigidity, because between here and here is going to be your weak spot, in between, especially the rear, because I cut out too much, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Between, you just got this little bit of area and this little bit of area. So this aluminum 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/16 thick, becomes my chassis or frame rails, as I called them. And they've been notched out accordingly. So the rear differential, my motor mount that I've already screwed, it is flush here, and it's about 1/16 of an inch bigger than the frame rail itself. And those are just little M2 screws. So I'll attach those and we'll get to the next step. So here is the steering mechanism I came up with. This actually also helps support the axle covers up over there. And these two over here are for the rear. So this is a front steering hub out of technically a New Bright RC car, and this one, the metal one, is two-wheel drive buggy. And it's pressed in flush from the bottom going in This is 2 pieces of 3/16 ABS that were glued together overnight, and it was carefully notched and drilled to fit just underneath the differential housing. And so that will, this will get screwed through the plastic and through the aluminum. And here's a close-up view of what knurling looks like. That just provides the friction fit, so that way it's not going to rotate or come out very easily. And I did, because each one of these is handmade, and each one is just a little bit different, and you can see that I marked them. Like this one happens to be right rear, there is a left rear, right front, etc. This one here might be harder to read because the screws are in it, but they are all marked because each one is just a little bit different than the other one. Well, there's our blocks set in place. I did have to remake those. If you follow along in the series, you'll know the reason why is because of steering mounts. So the steering mounts right there for the bell crank system are actually 2 pieces of 3/16 glued together. And the rear is just some scrap ABS. I'm not even sure that stuff is really ABS or not. It's something very similar. I used it on the front for the bumper area to give the bumper something to kind of push up against. And it doesn't want to glue up, so it might be something slightly different than ABS. It just looks like ABS. Alright, the next step, we're going to drop the gears in. And I've had them soaking in oil for about a week. The gears, I locked the rear differential. You want to learn how to lock the rear differential, there are lots of videos out there, and I left the front unlocked. To me, I think that provides better driving characteristics for the style of driving that I drive. So here I got some axle braces that help reinforce the weak area in here and in there, and they're going to slide down over the top of the axle right there before the top part of the cover goes on. And even though they look very, very similar, because each one is handmade, each one is a little bit different. This is just 1 piece of 3/16, and if I stack them all on top of each other, the screws would be off just a little bit, and so would the holes, so that's why they're not interchangeable. Really hard to do on camera one-handed, but each one is just a little bit different than the other one, and they got little relief cuts in here. Man, fucking camera. Got these little tiny relief cuts. There it is. You can see right there, and that's to clear the shock tower. So again, these parts are also labeled. Like that one there says right rear. So there's kind of what that looks like. These little axle blocks right there, or axle braces. They also help reinforce. So now this cannot come out. Now this one cannot come out. You want to make sure it rolls freely, and all this stuff here you're seeing is just a little oil, because like I said, these are bathing in oil for about a week. And I've been taking out my pan head screws and replacing them with an assortment of M2 tapered seats. You know, be good to have an assortment of those. If you can't have them, get them on Amazon or some other place. A hobby store is definitely more expensive. So here's my carrier bearing. And it's a push fit, and my drill bits were either too small or too big, so I actually had to go in there with a rotary tool and widen the hole just a little bit and squeeze it in there with a pair of pliers. So next is going to be assembly of the drive shaft. Bearings are going to go on each end of those. Carrier bearing is going to go on, reduction gear, and then end gear. So here's a steering mechanism I came up with. And as you can see, right in this area right here, put a piece of aluminum tubing in there. And here's a top view of it. So it gets an M2 screw, scrap piece of aluminum, and a little bit of Loctite for the nut. And then you want to make sure you get the same feel, the same kind of feel, same kind of drag on both sides. That way you're not putting too much stress on the servo.